So, State of Decay 2 Juggernaut Edition has recently been released, and it promises to be a new and improved version of the game, offering more content as well as overall enhancements to the visuals and gameplay. And today, I'm going to be doing a little retrospective type of review, taking the Juggernaut Edition and re-reviewing it and kind of comparing it to my original review of the base game from back in 2018. In that review, which you can find in the description below, I gave the game a 5.5 out of 10, saying that it had some fun moments, but it was too buggy and repetitive, with lots of minor issues throughout. Now, for this new edition, there are several tweaks and changes, and I'm going to spend a bit more time than usual when describing things, as I want to make some direct comparisons between the two versions. But to keep it simple and organized, I'm still going to break it up into my 3 normal categories, and then at the end, tell you if I think it's worth it now. So, let's get started.
Why would you turn into the Pizza
I don't know,
Hut?
you said to the right, and it looks like a road.
That's not a road, that's a Pizza Hut. This is a right.
So, the story aspect of State of Decay 2 has remained pretty much the same, which means that it still has the same shortcomings as the base game. The overall narrative has always been simple and is pretty much just kill zombies and survive. And while I don't expect this game to have a whole lot in the way of story, I think they definitely could have added something new to it with this update. See, the biggest narrative beat is like the overall theme of survival, but surviving is not even really the gameplay's strong suit, as dying is honestly a challenge, and I still have yet to die once in all 3 times I've played the game, even on the harder difficulties. In my opinion, this just makes the already weak survival narrative feel even weaker because there aren't a whole lot of consequences. Even the game's biggest threat, the blood plague, is incredibly easy to cure, and once you build the infirmary, the threat kind of just completely goes away. But the world doesn't just revolve around you, as there are several other human characters out there also trying to survive. And while this has potential to create some really interesting scenarios, most of your interactions with them are either bringing them supplies or confronting them for doing something bad. If you choose to help, they give you some minor backstory about what their situation is, but all roads basically lead to 2 options. You either go out and search for resources, or travel with them to search for something. Both of which are pretty much the same gameplay-wise. If the situation called for you to confront them, you are then given the option to forgive or kill them. Forgiving them opens the path for you to invite them to join your group, and killing them gets you their gear. Neither choice makes any real impact on the story or world, so if they had bad stats, we usually just killed them. It's a shame that all these encounters and story beats are so shallow and lackluster, because I think there is room to add something really cool. Maybe some moments where you have to follow a long and winding breadcrumb trail leading you to some secret base or a hidden stash of gear that some insane person had left behind. Maybe there could have been a deep-rooted conspiracy behind something, or hell, even behind the whole plague itself. Maybe there are some puzzles you have to solve. Maybe if you're assholes to the other survivors, they can gang up and lead like a full-scale attack on your base. I just think there's plenty of room to add things like this, and I had some hope that this new edition would do more to alleviate the banality and boredom found within every mission story. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I will say though, just like in my first review, I think the survivors in your base actually lead to some really interesting stories. Not because I cared about any of their concerns or what they had to say, but because every single person that I've recruited has managed to be absolutely batshit insane.
What is he doing?
I need to get some space before I hit somebody.
What is she doing?
Dude, she's got the big axe running around in circles talking about, I need space before I hit someone.
I honestly think this is for the better though, as it really does make for some highly entertaining moments. And like I said in my initial review, since there isn't a big overall narrative, most of the story comes from your own adventure and the countless dumb moments that occur. Sure, most of the moments are unintentional and usually revolve around the game just shitting itself, but they occur nonetheless, and I guess I gotta give it some credit for that, because it really can be entertaining as hell. So overall, I'd say that any attempt at a serious narrative still falls completely flat, though there is a lot of entertainment found within the countless moments of idiocy. I do understand that the game's story isn't the main focus here, so I'm not too upset though, but I really think that there was room to try to improve with this update, and it's a bit of a shame that they didn't.
That's over. We'll have to find another day, right?
It's not over, there's a big fat guy with the plague right over there.
State of Decay 2 is a zombie survival game that focuses around building up a group of survivors and destroying tons of zombies that are spread across the land. You can also play it in co-op, which is a big plus, and that's the way I've played it for all 3 times that I've checked the game out. The co-op is the annoying, you're helping your friends game kind of thing though, and not true co-op where you can completely work together. But it's not too bad because you can kind of just give all your resources and stuff to your friend, and then he can craft and build things and give it to you. It really would be nice to see them add a normal co-op mode, because I think this helping your friend nonsense is really pointless, but there is an easy way to act like it's still true co-op, so it's not a huge deal. The general gameplay structure and flow has also remained pretty much the same as before, essentially revolving around a 3-part system. 1. There are zombies, go kill them. 2. Gather resources and supplies. And 3. Manage your home base. The actual combat itself is pretty much the same as before too, with a very simple system where you kind of just walk up, hit the melee button until they die, or shoot them in the head. It's simple and I think it works well for the style of the game that it is, but it's far from great, and having to deal with lagging, stuttering, or invisible zombies doesn't make it any more enjoyable, but I'll get into that a bit later in my discussion about the bugs. The different zombie types have also remained mostly the same as before, though there are these new armored zombies which I think are new to this, but they may have also been there for the DLC. But other than that, there's no big new enemy introduced, and the variety is still okay with 7 different types, though only 3 of them actually require you to fight any differently. As far as the missions go, they're about as straightforward as the stories within them, and there's basically 2 kinds with slight variation. The majority of it are missions that just revolve around you clearing out a zombie-infested area, and then there are some that require you to scavenge for specific resources. And even though some have a slightly different context to it, like if you're helping a survivor search for his lost family member or something, the gameplay is still the same. You go to a marked area on your map, you kill any zombies there, and you look for the item or person you need. I think it works well at first, but just like I said in my 2018 review, it will certainly feel repetitive after a bit, especially since it doesn't really ramp up at all, and the very first mission you do is practically the same as the very last mission. And with no real narrative to keep you going either, the tedium can set in pretty quickly. After that, there were some additions of completely new content. First are some new contract missions, which are cool little achievement style tasks where you can get a certain amount of kills or do something X amount of times, and then you'll get a better weapon as a reward for it. I like this, and I think it's a really simple but good addition to the game. It allows you to always have something to work towards with the reward of getting better gear. And speaking of gear, there are a few more items in this version of the game. Most notably are the class of heavy melee weapons, which are kinda cool if you like that sort of thing, though personally I never really used them because I just found them too slow and clunky for my taste. Then there are some new guns that may or may not have been added from the DLCs, but either way, they weren't here in the base game, and as of now there is definitely more variety in the weapons than there was in the original, which is good. Though, like I said earlier, the combat has pretty much remained the exact same. And lastly, there are new clothing items and customization, which is a very simple but great thing to add in a game like this. It gives you something else to search for, and it's nice to be able to customize your character's look.
Yes!
Where'd you find a gun?
Classic cowboy hat.
Oh my god.
Then when it comes to managing your community and building up your base, I can say that I definitely still enjoyed the simple but fun base mechanics and the micromanaging you have to do to keep your community happy and healthy. And this new update also comes with a brand new map to choose when starting your game. It's a pretty solid map and does a decent job to make sure the locations are varied, though I don't think it has as many memorable places as the original 3 maps. Now don't get me wrong, it's still solid, but for returning players, you might not be too impressed with it. But with the new map comes searching for new bases, which was something that I found pretty enjoyable in the original game. It's cool to be able to look for even more bases, and I think a few of them are pretty nice, but they still do run into a bit of the same problem as last time, where there's not really a reason to start a base at one of the smaller spots, because it's just going to be objectively worse than getting a big base with lots of space. And that way the bases still do feel a bit stilted, as there's only maybe 3 real choices per map. Despite that, I do think it is fun to look around at your different options and then customize it a bit to fit your needs. And while the customization isn't the most in-depth since you can only really place things in the specified slots, I still think it's decent enough for what it is. I also think the way your resources affect your base works pretty well, where everything you do requires a different resource. If you want to craft more health items, you need meds. If you want to build a new structure, it's going to require materials. It all works pretty logically, and I think it's a solid survival mechanic and requires you to keep focus on your resource levels and plan your trips around it. And when it comes to making those trips, you're going to need a car to help you get around. And for newcomers, there is a solid selection with about 12 different options scattered across the map. Though unfortunately, there are no real vehicle changes from the base game, aside from 2 skins. To me, it seemed like adding more vehicles would be a no-brainer, and it's a bit of a shame that they didn't. For me and my friend Jim, one of our favorite parts of the base game was collecting all the cars and displaying them in front of our base, so I would have liked to see more, though first-time players will be fine in the selection that they offer. And speaking on Jim, he hasn't changed much either, and he's still as much of an idiot now as he was back in 2018.
What the fuck was that?
I'm stuck. There's a horde on me. Oh fuck! I pushed the wrong button.
Overall though, I'd say that the small changes to the gameplay are certainly good, but the game could have used more as it still suffers from too much repetition and simplicity. Newcomers will find more to enjoy, but if you're a returning player, there's not a whole lot worthwhile here. So the art and design of the game is the section where we saw the most easily recognizable of the updates, which is the revision of the old lighting and post-processing. The devs went in and revamped the whole look to give it a more vibrant and stylized feel. It's nothing amazing, and it's up for debate on whether you think it looks better. Personally, I think the outside has a nice stylized feel, which I think is an improvement, but the interiors seem to have gotten a bit too washed out, and are worse than they looked in the base game. The nighttime lighting though, which was a strong point in the original, is still really good, and probably the best recreation of accurate night lighting. It's not just blue, it's, actually night outside. There have also been some changes to the terrain materials and shaders, and I think it's a pretty subtle but nice improvement over the original. So it's not like a full remaster or anything, but it's a decent change, and I think it's mostly for the better, though again the interiors don't look great. The music, on the other hand, is still as fantastic as ever, and Jesper Kid's score is still one of my favorites and does a terrific job of capturing the feeling of isolation with an impending threat all around you. We also saw some updates to the game's performance, and while I will say that I didn't play the base game on PC, I did play the Heartland DLC on PC, and it ran like absolute ass, struggling to reach even 60 FPS on my RTX 2080. However, I'm happy to say that the Juggernaut edition runs better than that, and I can mostly average around 70 to 90 FPS when walking around and fighting, though it does dip to around 40 sometimes when driving. There have also been some overall bug fixes, which were definitely needed, and as a whole, I can safely say this version is less buggy than the base game. But unfortunately, that isn't saying much at all, because the base game was the buggiest thing I'd ever played, and even though there are less bugs now, it's still buggy as shit. We have zombies lagging and teleporting, overall lag with the game.
What just happened?
Several invisible zombies that are impossible for me to fight and caused unnecessary annoyance. Then we have these weird lines that go across my screen while indoors, some great moments where you get trapped by the NPCs, swarms that appear out of thin air, and everyone's favorite, flying cars.
Close the door.
What the hell just happened?
And whatever the hell this is.
Dude, with this sniper tower,
What the hell?
commercial fridges
Jim!
enabled?
I just
What?
repaired the car and then it fucking flew into the air and exploded. And now I need another toolkit. I just wasted a toolkit for it to just break even worse.
Oh, and also, while playing with a friend, expect to disconnect. A lot. Because the servers still aren't great. So even though it's less buggy, it's still a bit of a buggy mess. Thankfully, most of these bugs are just kind of funny, but things like the exploding cars and disconnects are pretty annoying. When it comes to the overall art and design aspect, I think that while the visuals were never that impressive to begin with, the changes are a decent improvement, and the music is still fantastic. Though, the game is incredibly buggy. So, despite all of my criticisms, I will say that there is still a decent amount of fun to be had here. Sure, a solid chunk of it is going to be at the expense of the terrible bugs and hilariously dumb characters, but it's still entertaining nonetheless. And while I still don't think it's a good game, I think the Juggernaut edition makes it better than it was before, but not by much. My views as both a gamer and a critic have also changed since 2018, and while I think this game is objectively better than before, I think I enjoyed it less this time, and I think I may have given it a bit too much credit in my initial review. I did have a good amount of fun when I first played it, but a lot of that was admittedly laughing at the game instead of with it, and I probably should have given the base game a 5, or at least that's what I would give it now. So I guess with that, I'd say that for returning players, I really don't think it's worth going back, as the changes are pretty minor, and unless you're some huge State of Decay 2 fan, I just don't think this is a very replayable game, as the variety is still really lacking. And for newcomers, I do think it's an improvement from the 2018 version, and I can safely say that if you're interested, it's far from a bad way to spend your time, though make sure to get it on Game Pass. If I had to rate it, I'd say that it's probably still a 5.5. Despite being a bit better, I don't think any of the changes were really significant enough to warrant going any higher. The new lighting effects do look a bit better in my opinion, but since the game never really looked that good to begin with, adding some more filters is a pretty minor improvement. The core issues of the game still haven't been addressed, and the only truly worthwhile change are the new contract missions. I mean, even the new map isn't really that special because while I think it's solid, I just think the other ones are better. This Juggernaut edition feels weird to be marketed as such a significant re-release because it really just feels like this all could have been part of some random patch or update. though since this update basically was the game's official launch on Steam, it does make a bit more sense why they would go this route. But anyway, I think there is still some fun to be had here, but the game suffers from the same serious core issues as before, and I don't think this re-release is worth going back to if you've already played the game. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. If you made it this far, let me know what you thought of the review. If you played the game yourself, leave a comment with your opinion on the game. Let me know, have you played it before? Do you think it's worth playing now? And stay tuned for more, and I'll see you in the next video.